So welcome everyone to this Fintech Talents Fireside chat. I am thrilled that I am here speaking with Jill Castillo, who's the CEO of Citizens Bank of Edmonds. So hi, welcome.
Hi, it's so good to see you.
You too. So very excited about this Fireside chat. We're all here about talking about innovation. But first of all, I'd love you to set the scene and tell us a bit about the Citizens Bank of Edmonds.
Yes, so we're just your quintessential community bank here in America. We're in a suburb of Oklahoma City, so smack in the middle of the country. Just one location, $320 million asset size institution with 55 team members. We've been here for 120 years on this same intersection, and during the financial crisis in 2009. We survived it. We were the worst performing bank in Oklahoma back then. And once we made it through to the other side, we just had this resolve that we wanted to be around for another 100 years. And so the bank really shifted from being this traditional community bank to being much more innovative and having the audacity to think that we could pave the way for what the future for community banking looks like in America.
So there's a lot more background to the Citizens Bank that I'd love you to go into, and especially on recent partnerships, and especially when when we talk about innovation and crisis, and usually a lot of the time a crisis always sparks that sense of innovation. Can you expand a bit more on that?
Yeah, so this last year has just been unprecedented in its challenges. And when you're brought into a crisis, you're either going to be a leader or you're going to be a follower. And our team just decided that we're going to take on this role of being economic first responders. We saw how our medical community was running to the aid of our country and really leading the way to ensure that we remain healthy through this situation. But we knew it was our duty to help our community be able to sustain itself economically. And so right from the beginning, we were meeting with we called every single one of our customers, every single one of them on the business side, and sent letters to all our consumer customers asking for feedback and how we could help, and received some great suggestions. And the bank just took this lead to be an advocate nationally with with Congress, with the administration, with senior regulatory officials to provide them feedback as to this is what we need to ensure that our businesses can sustain through this crisis. We're also using social media very heavily to advocate for the small businesses specifically, and that caught the attention of Mark Cuban here in America. And we were engaging about first how to get stimulus money to citizens in our community, and he used us as an example to be able to provide feedback to the rest of and a challenge really to the rest of the financial institutions here on this is how you can get stimulus funds to your customers by using our bank as an example. And we ended up having 400 banks contact us and implement some other form to get these stimulus funds to their customers. We also then when the Paycheck Protection Program was put in place to provide some liquidity to our small businesses here. We were very active on social media. Our bank, as I mentioned, is quite small, but we serve as a matchmaker to banks and small businesses around the nation to ensure that small businesses could find access to these funds, even though we couldn't serve them directly. And one Saturday, I had 1,000 interactions with different small businesses, finding them an outlet for these loans, not resulting in any customers for my bank, but just trying to do good out in our community. At the same time, Mark Cuban kind of saw these interactions and kept elevating and promoting our bank. And then we starting to get customers from around the country banking at our little bank in Oklahoma just because of our leadership through that exercise. SSC, once the forgiveness application came out related to these loans, so the government was forgiving these loans, it was a very cumbersome application process, even more robust than the original application for the loans. So he just challenged us to see, can citizens come up with an easier way for small businesses around the nation to get to these forgiveness dollars. And so in 10 days, we collaborated with a fintech who donated their services to turn around PPP.bank, which was a guided application tool for not even our customers. We already had a separate tool for our customers, but so that small businesses around our nation could produce a PDF with a forgiveness application to provide their fintech or the bank that they're working with, so they wouldn't have the burden of debt service related to these loans. That ended up winning several awards for collaborations with the fintech, and really set the stage. I watched into early in this crisis, and the whole theme there was a song about doing the next right thing, and that was really kind of the mantra that we held. You know, the crisis was so big and we were so small and we really didn't think that we can make an impact, but we just kind of kept doing that next right thing and eating that elephant one bite at a time. And as a result, made some substantial progress and weren't intimidated to rush to action to help our country through this challenge.
I mean, I love that when you said about it being an economic first responder, because when you think of first responders, obviously you think about health and other aspects, and it's very rare in finance that it's considered the same way. So do you think that when it comes to that aspect, that you and with the bank have really changed in a way, the wider national mindset of how they approach finance, and it's just as integral in terms of first responding as health is, especially in this crisis?
I hope so. I mean, our first duty, I think, as bankers, much like the medical community, is not to do any harm and to really help and to have this trusted relationship with our customers and the public. And this crisis, I think, really helped forge those that really had that mindset as being something that we're known for. And Cuban called it Corona karma, that how you act in this crisis would provide goodwill for decades to come, because you're really proving who you are. And we saw some other, lots of other community banks take this call for economic responders. We also saw some institutions that chose not to do that, that were more economically mindseted about their own situation rather than that of the country. And for us, we really set aside profitability, even that sustainability of our organization, knowing that if our community is not doing well, we will not do well. We are a direct reflection of them. And so for us, from a culture standpoint, we know who we are, because we were in fire, and we acted in the way that we always said we would, but we actually lived up to those words that we had always said internally of who we are. And so as an organization, it will definitely set the stage for what the future looks like. But I think also in the industry, that those that acted appropriately and had this call to action and rushed to the aid of our small businesses particularly, will be known for that for, again, decades to come, and hopefully lead the way for others to follow.
You mentioned earlier in the talk about obviously the effects naturally as a bank during the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. How much of that crisis do you feel shaped the the attitude in terms of now with this global health pandemic, how you responded, and were there key things that you learned from last time?
Oh, for sure. The going kind of staring death in the face as we did in 2009, 2010, and overcoming it allows us to have a lot more courage than I think and we had a massive culture change as a result of that. We had a lot of inappropriate behavior that we had to really change who we were as an institution and take these dramatic steps to changing the culture. And then when we said we want to be around for another century, that's very intimidating to know that the decisions we make now will determine how relevant we are 20 years from now, and that we made some missteps, then we could really be in peril. And so because at the same time when we went through this crisis, we also consolidated and sold all our branch network and consolidated one location. And with that, we developed an interactive teller at the ATM. This was before ITMs were available. It was basically FaceTime at the ATM. And it cost us $15,000 per ATM to develop. And we partnered with a hospitality company here in town in Oklahoma City. And we found the innovation didn't have to be difficult, and it didn't have to be very expensive, and it didn't have to take a long time. It took us 6 weeks to get that to market. And so that was our kind of first stage and kind of innovation, but it all came from the foundation of courage, having again, overcome a really difficult situation. It was the fastest turnaround in the nation without adding capital, according to our regulators. So we're used to kind of being MacGyvers too, of being able to solve these really big problems, but only having like the stick of gum and paperclip, like very limited resources to solve the issue. We recently filed for our first patent last year, and we would never have had the resolve to do that without both the crisis of 2009 through 2010, but also the consolidating of branches and being so close to our customers and knowing that we don't have the luxury of just having a location that customers will come to us. We have to get to know them. We have to get to know our community so well that we overcome being the smallest fish in a pretty big pond with the biggest players in the world that we're competing against, that we have to have customers choose us. And the only way we can do that is just know them very well and respond to them. As a result, we had a little coffee shop that wanted to bank with us. They were really far away geographically. And so we ended up devising a cash depot, essentially a remote bank that's classified for regulatory purposes as an electronic banking facility, is essentially a small business ATM where they can get rolled coin. And because we still use a lot of cash here in Oklahoma, they can make cash deposits, withdrawals that are way too big for an ITM or ATM to handle. And so we were able to, in the pandemic, to expand that into other areas so that small businesses could access the bank even though our lobby was closed. And so, but all of that stems back from being courageous, knowing that we've got the talent internally and the opportunities for partnerships, and have spent a long time curating relationships. So we have trusted relationships where we know not only that someone can execute what we're asking them to do, but they have that common mindset of wanting to help and believing that we have the capacity to do that, even though we're small institutions. I love being not having a ton of resources and being quite small, because it makes you so nimble, and you have to be so thoughtful with what you invest in and what leaps you take, and what you have to be so mindful with what partnerships you develop, because a misstep really can cost you so much. And we are able to operate with that high level of pressure because we had it in 2009 and 2010.
I mean, it's incredible, the speed and the level of innovation. And like you said, you've been MacGyvering a lot of it. And, although you may thrive in that, there may be some people watching now going, some of those ideas, I wish we could implement it now. But as a leader, it's very hard to, when we think of innovation, it'll be that one thing, and that one thing that you'll focus on. But with yourself, your leadership team and the bank, there's multiple things happening at one time. I mean, practically, how do you innovate across all those different areas and at the speed in which you've done it? How do you balance out when you bring in partners and when you can do it yourself?
And we refer to ourselves as a 120-year-old startup. And so I think that's what you kind of get with us. You have to be able to always be aware of opportunities and always be aware of things that you need to cut ties with as quickly as possible. I mean, we do not have much room for error, but we also, if we don't take risk, if we don't make moves, we will die. So you can't just stay still and be paralyzed in fear by lack of action, because opportunities will pass you by and you'll be quickly irrelevant. But you also are nimble enough where you can't take on 5,000 things. So you have to be able to discern what opportunities to pursue and what not to. We operate, for instance, a co-working facility for our customers. So we have a podcast studio. We have about 40,000 square feet of a collaborative co-working space that was an old branch, essentially, that was a block away from another branch. Terribly inefficient, was a monkey on our back. And when you did our SWOT analysis, was a huge weakness for us. And where we really find a lot of opportunity is switching those weaknesses to strengths, to switching challenges to opportunities. And that little space, that pivot is where the innovation lies. And usually it's very inexpensive. It's something that can be done very quickly. And again, it doesn't necessarily take technology. We seem to think as bankers or in the financial space that we need to have millions of dollars to be innovative, or we got to have this extraordinary IT budget, or that we've got to have these really sophisticated partners, and that everything has to, we don't have developers on staff, and where do we get developers? When in fact, that's not really what innovation is. Innovation is being aware of those opportunities and being able to quickly make some magic happen faster than someone else could, and seeing the potential more readily than what your competitors do.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that I definitely would like to hear from you about is that you've got that key sweet spot where you're talking about that obviously community comes first, and obviously getting to know your customers. At the same time, because you're small and you have to be nimble, there's not a huge margin for error, and you have to be, you have to be very analytical on what you have to let go and what you pursue. Now, there was an interesting part that you brought up about cash, and obviously in Oklahoma, using cash quite a lot, but there's lots of regions or countries where cashless society, more smart smithies is becoming more and more the next generation. And naturally, as a bank or a business, you're always looking at how you can bring in more customers and be fit for that kind of new generation, while also retaining those loyal ones. Now, it's a very roundabout way of saying it, but it's when it comes to the cash side, we've seen a lot of banks really paring back in that kind of face-to-face, day-to-day bank branches, and trying to move their customers away from cash. How do you balance out those older loyal customers and that ones that probably still use rolls and rolls of coins versus bringing on, in the fintech world, more digital payments, less face-to-face interaction, but still have that kind of personability?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So you can start to where you think that there's two different segments. There's these old-fashioned that they want cash and they don't want to have anything to do with digital, and then there's the no cash, only digital. When in fact, it's really this gigantic mashup here. Of course, there's preferences on the cash and what your payment mechanism is, but really everybody is expecting you to be highly relevant, and that they will not sacrifice technology to go from the largest bank in the world to come to Citizens Bank of Edmond. So I have to stay totally engaged with what's happening in the industry from a technology standpoint and be ahead of it. And so how we handle it is really drawing inspiration from other sectors. So I love stealing ideas from the fast food industry, for instance, because their ideas and technology are quite inexpensive, and their customer is giving them immediate responses. And so you can see the transition from cash to cashless, even here in Oklahoma. It used to be not that long ago that I could write a check at the local Burger King to pay for lunch. Like, this was like not that long ago, like 10 years ago, I could do that. Well, that's ridiculous. Like, you can never think about going into a fast food restaurant and writing a check. That's preposterous. And so, but now, but that was at, a speed of a decade that changed. We're seeing, crypto and other opportunities that, contactless cards and utilizing tokenization for payments, and that just happens so quickly and is just as prevalent whenever I go to breakfast in the same place every morning, and the average age has to be 70 in the little diner that I go to. Well, they have Apple Pay, and they're not just like cash only. So I think that you have to get to where you realize that even if you're in a rural space where it's cash dominant, the expectation is still to have really kick-ass technology, and so you have to be aware of that. So fast food technology I love, and also the hospitality industry, to be able to provide that user experience. So fast food, you get like the high transaction volume, and what happens there, we stole curbside banking from that industry. So we now have it where our customers come to curbside, and the older customers love it because they're not coming inside the bank. They can pre-order what they need to do, and we come and serve them at their car, but for transactions they can't do through our drive-through, or they can't do through mobile. Hospitality industry, beautiful user interfaces, and really trying to anticipate not just what the customer needs, but what makes them feel happier in the space, whether it's on digital. So we look at more the aesthetics of that. So just the aesthetics of being relevant, not just even the functionalities of being relevant. So making sure the colors are crisp, but the font is right, and that we have kind of that look and feel of something that's much more sophisticated than really what we are. So it really is this all encompassing, very tiring, honestly. I love being at a small bank because you have to be thinking very much all the time in all these different ways, serving not just one archetype or another, because we do try to serve everybody, and which is not, whenever you're coming up with a business plan for your new bank, what most people try to do, but we really do try to serve everyone. And it requires there to be highly intelligent people that I get to work with, who are smarter than me, that can challenge me, but that are really eager to understand the customer well, that are aware of the environment and all these different sectors that are doing creative things, and then figuring out how we can quickly integrate those ideas into our daily lives here at the bank.
So, looking into the future, like you said, especially from where you sit and the DNA of the company, you always have to be forward looking and thinking of the next thing, right? And I suppose over the last year, as you've seen and how you've executed, I can tell like you're probably one of the most action orientated CEOs that I've ever interviewed. But when it comes to the last year, naturally with the pandemic, it's accelerated a lot of digitization. And, you know, when people, banks or financial institutions, when it comes to that technology and innovation, it really catalyzed a lot of those plans. And also from the consumer point of view, it's literally from logistics, because there's a lot of places that have gone, well, we can't take cash because you're physically touching it. So it became more digital. How do you, especially in a crisis over the last year, and we're still in it now, how do you separate what is something that's going to be a long-term trend and something to invest in versus something that is being forced upon a consumer now and may not stick for the medium to long term?
Yeah, I mean, you're touching on something that this crisis has exposed that I think will be with us forever. And that is just that consumer expectations, preferences, they were changing. And we were thinking that there would be a big disruptive moment. There'd be like the Uberization of banking that kind of happens in one day, and our worlds are just turned upside down. But in fact, it's like, these innovations that are happening, like you were talking about the acceleration of things, the acceleration of the normalization of crypto. Well, a year ago, that would not have been anywhere on our plan, thinking that 25% of Americans hold Bitcoin. That would not happen, that I would have my most traditional customers walking in or calling me or texting me saying, hey Jill, I need to talk to you about Bitcoin, and how are we going to start, making it where it was really easy for me to purchase this via the bank. And so there's just been massive change. I think where we've been able to handle that is I publicly provide my cell phone number and stay in constant engagement with texting and engaging with our customers. And so I'm able to identify those trends really easily. Using social media, can have such great connections with the leaders of not only fintechs, but of our industry, and those that are from the outside, even consumer advocates or business advocates, that let you into the conversation very early, of saying like, hey, there's this great new thing that we want to partner with you with because we know that you'll jump all over it. And so just really staying in those conversations, even though you're in the midst of a crisis, even though you're in the midst of trying to serve and get liquidity out to small businesses, and make sure your staff is well cared for because of the challenges that they're managing now, that you still have to spend the time to stay part of the conversation, and stay engaged, so that you know how the tide is turning, because it's happening so fast and things are pivoting so quickly that it's not this massive, again, urbanization of the industry that we anticipated that was occurring. It's 100 pivots in all these different dimensions, whether it's cashless, regulators telling you, even healthcare officials telling you that maybe stay away from cash. I mean, who knew that would accelerate then Bitcoin or other utilizations of technology? It makes it too where here we invested in this cash facility. Maybe that's not relevant 3 years from now, and you have to be able to accept that maybe this is something that we pivot away from rather than pivoting to. And if we're going to really be entrepreneurs and kind of these bank entrepreneurs, then you have to be willing to cut ties. You have to be willing to challenge technology providers to meet customer needs or your own needs. And then you have to be very quickly to jump on trends that are likely here to stay. Our curbside banking, for instance, we implemented that will be here forever. We will always have curbside banking because that has changed customers' behavior. They now expect to not get out of their car. They want to be able to get their notarization at their passenger window rather than coming into the bank. So you can see behaviors get easily normalized. Crypto would be another one of those that I think are here to stay, and that will likely change the trajectory of what the future of banking looks like.
So Jill, I could talk to you for hours and also take a lot of notes for the future, but unfortunately, we've only got one more question left, and definitely, as it seems to be an oracle on it, give a bit of a steer looking into the future. I know you mentioned Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. I'd love to get your thoughts on, especially as a bank, and like you said, being a 100-year-old startup, being around for 120 years, the bank, not yourself, but the bank. There's a lot of financial institutions out there that are really looking at cryptocurrency still at an arm's length and a little bit worried about the volatility of it and really how, as a bank, you can meaningfully get involved in that market. It would be great to hear how you're approaching it and what are the kind of plans for the bank around that in the long term.
Yeah, so I will admit to not being a crypto expert and was slow to buy my first Bitcoin. So that was something that I'd always known about crypto. I ensured that I was educated about blockchain and technologies, but I really didn't think that would be something that our bank would be involved in for like decades to come. Never. I never thought that I would have a bank down the street that is promoting that you can access your crypto accounts through their accounts, and that's happening now. And honestly, it was regulator led. OCC was very progressive here this last year, especially, and being much more open to crypto's integration into the banking sector. And so I think it's here to stay. I think for us, it's determining how we can be involved with our regulator who's not as open with crypto. How do you ensure accessibility for the customer and that you're meeting those needs, but never endorsing one or offering as being like something that you wouldn't lose your principal from, because it is a very volatile environment. So it'll see how this evolves over the next few months. I don't think it'll take long to see what the impact is going to be. And then the digitalization of the dollar, where that goes. Whenever I think about digitalization of dollar, I'm like, well, that already has happened. I don't go and get truckloads of cash from the Fed whenever I need money from them. It's all digitally exchanged. But as we have changed so much in this crisis, and as we've seen the acceptance of crypto, and we've seen mass amounts of funding come into our communities because of the crisis, I'm still kind of waiting and seeing, but staying highly Patrick Sells, who's been on the forefront of that. So I make sure I stay engaged with him a lot. We'll, as a bank, we've looked at rewards programs so that maybe you're not a custodian, but you have some type of integration with crypto and introduction there for your customers. But I just think it's important to stay part of the conversation, even if it's something you don't understand well, or that you're not ready to jump, hold hands and jump off the cliff together yet, but you're staying engaged, knowing what the potential is, and that you're not caught off guard or on your heels whenever the customers' demands really change, or the regulators open up and competition is able to really jump on some of these opportunities faster than you can.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Jill, for your time today. And I think we're all going to be very looking forward to what's next. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure.
Absolutely. And for everyone who is at Fintech Talents Conference, if you could please stay with us on the main stage for more great content, and don't forget to post any comments in the chat.